It's a pleasure to welcome Donna Haraway to the University of California Humanities Research Institute and to have a short conversation together about the current state of the humanities, both within the academy and beyond, and where she thinks the humanities might be going or should be going. So Donna, how are you? It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's good to be back, because UCHRI is, of course, one of my first loves, and it sponsored some of my own work early on, and then I felt I was institutionally tied here to the advisors and governors boards. Okay. So this is a really important space, institution in my own life as personally as a scholar, but in our larger lives in UC and indeed internationally. All of us who are located institutionally in the humanities are acutely aware of the restructuring and, in some respects, defunding and reconfiguring the humanities. But I think what I want to concentrate on in these few minutes is more the vitality of the humanities, in the sense of really fascinating new kinds of connections that I find both younger and established scholars making, both with public worlds and historical worlds and different kinds of language worlds. And the word world is an important one for me. And I think of worlding, the making of worlds, as a kind of science fictional genre, but a speculative fabulation, as a way of thinking and engaging and participating in built worlds and imagined worlds and written worlds and archived worlds. And these practices engage humanists, whatever their disciplinary origins, in all sorts of ways. And probably the area that I find most compelling has to do with thinking what the humanities are about if they're not just about the human. So surely the attention of the humanities to digital worlds has been very creative and generative. UCHRI has been part of that too, of course. But the informatics partnership with variously historically situated human beings has been enacted and thought through in quite a number of ways, and that continues to interest me. But what interests me even more is the worlding with other species in the humanities. So what does it actually mean to say that other organisms, not just human beings, other animals, to make it a narrower category, actually do history? And it's not that other animals are not resources for the production of humankind, but are engaged with humankind in making each other who we are on this planet. In histories of agriculture, histories of travel, histories of disease transmission, histories of flourishing and not flourishing, that the worlding that the humanities needs to pay attention to is historical all the way down and doesn't stop at this thing we call nature. That indeed nature is a very particular configuration that we know how to narrate. We know how nature got into the story, and that it's not everybody's story. But what happens if we take concepts like labor and play and history and communication, semiotic, the making of meanings, and actually get it that a huge amount of what's going on in this world, economically, agriculturally, militarily, the domains of worlding that humanists, among others, need to be paying attention to, and public worlds as well as more intimate worlds, don't involve just us as players, and that the technologies and critters and people co-worlding. So, if I were the dictator of the future of humanity,
we'd love to have you as the dictator of the future.
Dictator. I would just make resources available, and because I find the work going on very exciting, very cross-reaching, very transversal, if you will. Transdisciplinary is sort of a word of the moment, but this tying knots across fields of practice and ways of making meanings. So the word humanities is a heritage, and I'm not interested in tossing out heritages easily. I think that the word humanities remains a word to inhabit, to work with, to offer, to put into the world as a player, whether it's a world of policy or of cultural production or of archiving. That the word humanities is a good word to inhabit. And it's also profoundly misleading if what one means by that is exclusively human. So best I can do, that's where I find the life of humanity.
I mean, would you say that the humanities is in that sense an analytic disposition?
Well, a mode of attention. Analytic. It is the humanities certainly are research practices, are multiple research practices and multiple analytical apparatuses that are constantly being reconfigured, or new ones invented, or old ones repurposed. That the humanities engage and invent analytical practices all the time, and that it's not that it's also more than that or other than that. That the humanities are modes of attending, modes of caring, practices of making connections and making cuts. The humanities these days and currently have been deeply interested in the travels of affect and the kinds of pressures of affect that different historical configurations put on each other, sometimes at intensely personal and intimate levels, other times more collective levels, both at the same time. So, like all the important words, the humanities is finally not indefinable. All the important words escape their definitions. That said, the institutionalizations, the funding apparatuses, the teaching apparatuses, the ways of bringing new scholars into the world need to be strengthened and enlivened, so that holding on to the teaching of languages cannot be a service occupation. The practices of writing are not just service for something else. The practices of the inhabiting of histories, the practices of transdisciplinarities and of feminist and gender studies and so on, that these things located often in the humanities continue to make a claim on our lives, including including investment, and that we should feel, I think, rather confident. I get very annoyed when the humanists get defensive, even on economic, well, even sometimes even especially on economic grounds within the university, when I'm aware of how much humanities scholarships actually underwrites scholarship in the sciences, rather than the other way around. If you start looking at student ratios and many other kinds of things, and that we have grounds for confidence and for building connections, but also not always connections aren't always the right way to go, and yet the connections that are both in place and to be built are fascinating.
Well, thank you very much. This has been marvelous, and we intend these as short interventions, and you've done fabulously.
Kind of end of rant.
in putting together in very concise terms exactly what we're driving at. Thanks so much.